to choose the next thing to put on our fork. Some are even 2 or 3 forkfuls ahead of themselves. One forkful is in the mouth, one is waiting on the fork, another is heaped up waiting on the plate, while the mind contemplates the morsel coming third on the fork. In order to relish the taste of your food and know life in its fullness, we should often savour one moment at a time in silence. Then we might get our money's worth in the 5-star restaurant called life. Solving the problem. As a Buddhist monk, I often get to talk live on radio shows. I should have been more cautious about accepting a recent invitation to a radio station one night. Only after I entered the studio was I told that the show was to be on adult themes and that I would be taking live questions together with a well-known professional sexologist. Once we got over the problem of pronouncing my name on air, we agreed that I would be called Mr. Monk. I did very well. As a celibate monk, I know little of the details of intimacy, but the underlying problems raised by the callers were easily recognised. Soon all the incoming phone calls were directed at me, and I ended up doing most of the work on the 2-hour show. But it was the professional sexologist who received the fat cheque. All I got, being a monk who can't receive money, was 1 chocolate bar. Buddhist wisdom solved the underlying problem again. You can't eat a cheque, and that chocolate bar was delicious. Problem solved. At another talkback show on radio, a caller presented me with the following question. I'm married, I'm having an affair with another woman, and my wife doesn't know. Is this all right? How would you answer? If it was all right, I replied, you wouldn't be ringing me to ask. Many people ask such questions knowing that what they are doing is wrong, but in the hope that some expert will convince them it is right. Deep inside, most people know what's right and wrong, only some don't listen carefully. Unwise listening. The phone rang one evening at our Buddhist centre. Is Ajahn Brahm there? Demanded the angry caller. I'm sorry, replied the devout Asian woman who picked up the phone. He's resting in his room. Please call back in 30 minutes. He'll be dead in 30 minutes, growled the caller, and then he hung up. 20 minutes later, when I came out of my room, the elderly Asian woman was still sitting white-faced and trembling. Others were around her trying to find out what was wrong, but she was too shocked to speak. But when I coaxed her, she blurted out, "Someone's coming to kill you!" I had been counselling a young Australian man since he was first declared HIV positive. I had taught him meditation and many wisdom strategies to help him cope. Now he was nearing his death. I had visited him only the day before and was expecting a call from his partner at any time. So I soon figured out what the call had meant. It was not me who would be dead in 30 minutes. It was the young man with AIDS. I rushed to his home and saw him before he died. Fortunately, I also explained the misunderstanding to the terrified Asian woman before she died too, from shock. How often are what is said and what we hear not the same? What wisdom is not. A few years ago, a number of scandals involving Thai monks appeared in the international press. Monks are bound by their rules to observe celibacy strictly. In my tradition, to be beyond all suspicion regarding celibacy, monks aren't allowed to have any physical contact with a woman, nor are nuns allowed physical contact with a man. In the scandals that were publicised, some monks had not kept those rules. They were naughty monks, and the press knew that their readers were only interested in naughty monks, not the boring rule-keeping ones. At the time of these events, I thought it was high time I made my own confession. So one Friday evening, in our temple in Perth, before an audience of some 300 people, some of them long-standing supporters, I summoned up courage and told them the truth. I have a confession to make, I began. This is not easy. Some years ago, I hesitated. Some years ago, I managed to continue. I spent some of the happiest hours of my life. I had to pause again. I spent some of the happiest hours of my life in the loving arms of another man's wife. I'd said it. I'd confessed. We hugged. We caressed. We kissed, I finished. Then I hung my head and stared at the carpet. I could hear the sounds of air suddenly drawn in through the mouth in shock. Hands were covering gaping mouths. I heard a few whispers. Oh no, not Ajahn Brahm. I pictured many long-standing supporters heading for the door, never to return. Even lay Buddhists didn't go with other men's wives. That's adultery. I raised my head, looked at my audience confidently, and smiled. That woman, I explained before anyone was out of the door, that woman was my mother, when I was a baby. My audience exploded in laughter and relief. Well, it was true, I shouted through the microphone above the howling. She was another man's wife, my dad's. We hugged, we caressed, and we kissed. They were some of the happiest hours of my life. When my audience had wiped off their tears and stopped giggling, I pointed out that nearly all of them had judged me mistakenly. Even though they had heard the words from my own mouth, and their meaning seemed so clear, they had leapt to the wrong conclusion. Fortunately, or rather because it was carefully planned, I was able to point out their error. How many times, I asked of them, are we not so fortunate and jump to conclusions on evidence that seems so certain only to be wrong, disastrously wrong? Judging absolutely, this is right, all else is wrong, is not wisdom. The danger of an open mouth. Our politicians have a reputation for being open, especially in the area between their nose and their chin.